All right. Well, thank you so much for joining, Paya. Super excited to have this conversation today. And yeah, thank you so much for making it after your trip to Vancouver.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. So let's kick things off by kind of diving into your journey as a tech founder, now as an advisor and mentor, and just kind of general amazing stakeholder in the tech community. How did it all start? How did you come up with the idea and kind of thesis behind work from homey? What was the light bulb moment or a particular experience that sparked that initial journey in building your startup?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it all comes down to personal experience. That's kind of what led me on to work from home. So prior to starting it, I was working at a startup called Nudge AI that just as the pandemic was hitting, was going through an acquisition. And so I was on the getting acquired side of things, and we were merging with a team that was based down in San Francisco. Our team was based down in Toronto. uh, the vision was for us to kind of start working together in SF and then for us to start a satellite office in Toronto. And so as Affinity was acquiring Nudge, the Nudge fall kind of went down. And then that was literally the week of the pandemic kicking in. So, we got to experience the proper kind of onboarding for the first handful of days. And it was an amazing experience. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is Silicon Valley level. This is how it gets done, all the right stuff. And then we all flew back because pandemic hit, right? So everybody was kind of just like working from their kitchen table and or basement or whatever. And it was just so interesting for me to see how it impacted my employee experience as a new employee at the time. And it really made me worried about companies that are hiring or trying to merge and integrate new people into their teams because it was just so much more difficult to do that remotely compared to, all the whistles you can have in the office and all the little offsites and lunches together and whatnot. And obviously by now we have figured out some kind of band-aids for some of these experiences, but the drop off, the delta was just so striking. And it really made me wonder how our company is going to be able to be successful and get their new employees really excited about what they're working on, beyond just kind of like, clocking it in, doing their 9 to 5, but really thinking about, okay, how could I help push this product forward or push this team forward, which is something that as kind of at the time entrepreneur at heart, I was like, well, I always want to work with teams that think that way, right? That kind of even when they close their laptop, like one of the things they might be thinking about is about how they can do something better, and it just seemed like it would be really difficult for leaders to kind of create that type of excitement. So with that, I started looking, interviewing HR people at the time, people, and starting to understand what has changed with them with the pandemic and kind of validating whether this hypothesis is right. And through that, discovered there's a lot of more tactical things that were actually a hurdle at the time, while obviously this is a challenge that has been also present. So this was, yeah, pandemic times, 2020, interesting time.
Oh, 100%. I remember that time very well. I think that was also when we met at the very beginning of the pandemic
Yes.
when you were trying to figure out what that next step was going to be. So, yeah, no, it's been amazing to see your journey with work from homey. And, I think you really kind of realized that dream. I wanted to also just say again, congratulations on the recent
Thank you.
acquisition. Such an exciting, experience for you to go through. Would love to know how this transition has been to kind of post acquisition.
It's been definitely interesting. I think, to be honest, I kind of underestimated what that's going to look like from like a personal founder life perspective. I think a lot of my friends, investors, other people in the industry tried to warn me about like how much of a shock it will be personally to just go, back to operator, back to just kind of obviously the role was going to shift, right, with joining the acquirer and then with whatever activities I might have been doing after that. So definitely on a personal note, it has been somewhat of a kind of like cultural change shock, but I wouldn't necessarily say in a negative way. It's just been very different. So things go, back from having kind of 100% responsibility over your team, your customers, responsibility to your investors, all those things that you're kind of like 24/7, every waking second, you're kind of, or at least that's how it was for me, you feel kind of accountable for everything to, while you're now part of something bigger. So obviously you still care. and you do have some autonomy, but there's only so much you can influence and impact. So it kind of changes how you think about things or how you approach making changes at that point. So that was me mostly, as I was answering that mostly as the like kind of post acquisition joining another team in terms of being able to spend more time mentoring, advising, investing, all that. I've been absolutely loving this journey. I never thought this would be something I would want to pursue, but I'm really grateful for the opportunities that came along in this direction, and that's been keeping me really excited.
100%. And I think, one of the most amazing things is when a founder becomes a part of the community in kind of a different facet where they're an investor, they're an advisor, because you've been through it. And I know, from my own experience, some of the best advice and mentoring that I've gotten has been from people that have gone through that experience, because it's so
100%.
unique. But I remember you mentioning, it's been kind of underestimated how crazy a transition is from being founder, CEO, and something I've been definitely thinking about. You kind of think back to how it was when you went from in-house to a founder, and
Exactly.
that was crazy enough. So yeah, I can't imagine the other way around. Um, so one of the things I wanted to ask, kind of on the advising side, as someone who advises startups, I'm sure you've seen it all when it comes to, challenges, especially kind of internally, whether you're ramping up, your customer success or kind of general like knowledge base and management challenges. What are some of the really common hurdles that you've encountered, especially with remote teams, if there are any?
Yeah, I think it's definitely kind of uh, when it comes to, and I mean this genuinely, not because I know what your product does, but genuinely finding the different pockets of information, especially as teams are remote, and a lot of the, even kind of the day-to-day on the go, a lot of the knowledge transfer just ends up happening in the DMs, and it's kind of between different employees who are like, might be working together on a specific customer or are just kind of helping each other figure out what has been the product update. So how do I resolve this ticket? And then by the time all of this information makes it into some form of a CRM, which I've also seen things from, Google Sheets to much more sophisticated pieces of software there, it feels like a chore to kind of update, what has been done, what have we learned today. So sometimes the information never makes it there, sometimes it does. But I think at this point, people have been conditioned to not necessarily treat the company's source of truth when it comes to customer information as an actual source of truth. So wherever that information might live, I've kind of seen people already treat it as like, it may or may not be true, or, this has been last updated by a teammate that's no longer with our team, or just kind of people question it to begin with, and that's supposed to be the best that they have. So they kind of, go in already knowing that it's not perfect. And so even for me personally, when I'm trying to, as I was joining a new team or when I'm trying to learn about a new company, I'm very much like an information gatherer. I'd love to understand everything from um, kind of firsthand and really get access to raw data. And I know that it's always challenging, and you quickly learn that different types of information lives elsewhere with different people. And honestly, in my experience, what has worked best has really been like finding the person that has been one of the superstars on the team, who's been with the team for quite some time, and you're better off talking to this person and kind of learning what do they have to say about what customer, their product, how it resonates, this or that, rather than relying on the written set of information that, as we know, is 99.9% of the time incomplete and or not just not fresh.
100%. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, as we are looking forward at how the tech industry is evolving, I think AI is also becoming such a big part of how we're trying to take those really kind of annoying or cumbersome tasks and kind of revamping them or making them more automatic. I'm really curious in your kind of perspective. I feel like, I'm focusing on Ariglad, so I feel like you have a bird's eye view of kind of what's going on in general in the industry. I'm curious, what are some of the biggest opportunities and also challenges for companies like Ariglad as we harness a technology like AI?
Yeah, I think the opportunities are definitely in the workflow automation across kind of verticals. So of course, in your case,
Mm,
customer success, I think the same applies to marketing, sales, different roles, and luckily there's looks like new companies are popping up in the space, or shifting to leverage AI to really help their customers make the most of it. So I do think that when it comes to information transfer, automating some flows that are internal that might feel less scary to start with because it's really just going from an internal person to an internal person to a CRM or to whatever type of software. I think that's a very kind of easy way for companies to ease into it when they're considering starting using AI, so it doesn't go straight into customer facing or candidate facing or anything like that. It doesn't have to be that way. But definitely some of that, because it's still striking how many tasks that are kind of done mostly internally are done manually and then lead to incomplete or not up to date information. I think in terms of challenges, I think it's mostly like a self-imposed adoption hurdle. I don't really want to speak to how real of a challenge it is, but definitely concerns around privacy, security, that sort of stuff. Like I've seen companies struggle with this to understand, like, with whom should we be sharing this data? So let's say, you have a huge customer success data set that goes into information about different accounts, different people on the account, this or that, and it would be great to break it down by product features that you can then pass on to product team that they can work with on their roadmap, when it comes to like what should we work on next, what really needs improving, et cetera, et cetera. And I know it might feel scary to just dump this mega set of information, even if you delete a few columns here and there into some form of AI. So I think it's mostly around the kind of hesitation when it comes to companies and different people at different companies kind of adopting the software. But I think there are amazing opportunities, and it can really speed up a lot of things and kind of make them more objective, rather than kind of qualitative. Because if certain topics do come up all the time, like they might be worth looking into. Like AI can be a great friend and just accelerator of things. So big fan.
100%. No, I totally agree. I think, yeah, no, it's a super exciting time. And I really just appreciate you hopping on to talk about this. One last question for you. I would love to ask, because of your experience in supporting teams kind of growing, especially remotely, do you have any advice for us as a fully remote team and anything that we should be kind of incorporating into our company?
That is a great question. I mean, this one has been true since at least the beginning of COVID, probably beginning of time. Over communicate, right? Just open lines of communication, just making sure to instill like extreme transparency and honesty among different team members, and then just um, being clear on kind of what processes feel right, and experiment with those processes. Because obviously one thing when it comes to remote work is the question of like, how do I communicate with somebody in the most effective way, et cetera, et cetera. But also some people just don't know when to stop. And of course, burnout has been an issue for many. So I just think being very clear about kind of what are the expectations from different team members, making sure that, half of the team doesn't spend their half of their day emotionally overthinking, like, oh my god, my boss didn't send me an emoji, are they mad? Kind of being very clear about what is normal on your team, and make sure that everybody's comfortable and kind of confident in, this is how I should be communicating, this is what type of communication I should be expecting to receive. And I think that can really ease the burden of people wondering what's going on where, and just lets everybody focus on the subject matter and kind of in a calm pace just keep grinding through stuff.
I love that. I actually love the word that you used, kind of over communicate, because I definitely experienced this as well. When we were starting and kind of growing, we didn't communicate enough. And I think it was because I just kind of assumed that everyone kind of knew generally what I meant, even though I wasn't like communicating enough. If I mentioned it once, I'm sure they got it, and I'm sure that sunk in. But I wouldn't work that way. That wouldn't be how I would kind of take in information. So yeah, no, I think now it's like I want to be able to communicate as much as possible. Would rather just annoy everyone with my information overload, than accidentally, miss something. So I think that's really good advice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paya. Thank you so much for hopping on and sharing your wisdom. And
Of
yeah,
course.
we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for everything. Bye.
Bye.